Welcome back. My name's Robin. I have 5 children, ages 7 and under. 3 are at school at GDA, and 2 are still at home with me. Today, we'd love to share with you what a basic overview of classical education is, as well as some terminology and common phrases within classical education. And at the end, we'll also share some more parent resources, so be sure to watch all the way to the end. So if we're at the park or the Children's Museum or wherever we may be on a Friday or a weekend and another parent strikes up conversation, it usually leads to, where do your kids go to school? And what is Gloria Deo Academy? And what is a classical education? What do we say when someone outside of our usual circles asks us, what is a classical education? A textbook answer for classical education: classical education is the cultivation of wisdom and virtue by nourishing the soul on truth, goodness, and beauty by means of the 7 liberal arts and the 4 sciences. A parent answer or short answer for moms could be a way of educating that has stood the test of time, or that classical education seeks truth, beauty, and goodness. Okay, so that all sounds beautiful and awesome, but what does that look like in daily life? How does our kids' schoolwork look different from schoolwork in other schools? A lot of times, classical education outlook starts even before kindergarten, and we're probably doing it as parents without even realizing it. For example, piety, instilling a sense of right and wrong, duty and respect to authorities, and doing what's right because it's the right thing, not necessarily for self-gain. Musical education, or if you flip it around, it's a little bit easier to remember, education of the Muses. So that would be dance and music, art, so coloring and painting, sculpting with Play-Doh, and then even storytelling and story reading. And gymnastics, learning with body movement. So all the things kids already love to do: running, jumping, playing, climbing, swinging, all things with their little body movements on the playground. A very broad overview of our school-age children's classical education categories would be the Trivium, so that is grammar, logic, and rhetoric, and the Quadrivium in upper or higher education. This is where GDA really helps to step in and provide support and really nourishing the classical education for our students via the classroom strategies and curriculum. Some of these day-to-day components that are different from other school curriculum and approaches are things like narration, memory work, a study of Latin, and a more nature study approach in the early grammar years, in addition to their biblical studies. So we do all of these classical education things on our home days, and also they're happening in the classroom as well. What is the whole point? What is the ultimate goal of this classical education structure? Every classical education school of thought will have their own tweak or twist on their answer to this question, but the authors in liberal arts tradition, according to them, have said that the ultimate goal of classical education should be wisdom and virtue. It's been said that a classical education begins in wonder and ends in wisdom, and according to Socrates, wisdom begins in wonder. How do we define wisdom and virtue? Wisdom can be defined as discerning, or the ability to discern what is true and what is good. Virtue could be defined as a proper ordering of our loves, according to St. Augustine. Imagine our students graduating, going on to higher education or out into the world with a confident ability to discern what is true and good, and also a proper ordering of their loves and their lives. I think this is something that we would all hope and desire for our kids. Knowing that, then other than the classical education structure involving the Trivium with grammar, logic, and rhetoric, as well as the day-to-day classical education curriculum and strategic approaches, such as memory work, Latin study, narration, etc., how do we go about giving a well-rounded classical education to our students that leads to wisdom and virtue? Well, in answer to that, here are some classical education schools of thought or phrases and their meanings that can help our understanding in the day-to-day, as well as the overall big picture. Ordo amoris, a proper ordering of our loves. St. Augustine defines virtue as ordo amoris, the ordinate condition of the affections in which every object is accorded that kind and degree of love which is appropriate to it. Augustine describes virtue as not merely loving the right objects, but loving them in the right order. Multum non multas, much, not many. Classical Christian education deals deeply with few subjects rather than hastily with many. The subjects reflect her emphasis on the seven liberal arts, mastery of which develops the content and skills that flow through all of the modern subjects. Twaddle versus living books. Twaddle, silly, idle talk, or something insignificant. Living books, books that make the subject come alive. They must grow upon the best. There must never be a period in their lives when they are allowed to read or listen to twaddle or reading made easy. There is never a time when they are unequal to worthy thoughts well put, inspiring tales well told. Some prefer to rid their homes of all twaddle books. However, we do keep occasional twaddle on our lower bookshelves, where if they get a little beat up, I'm okay with that too. I've never found twaddle books to be greatly offensive, especially for early readers, but I try to remember something I once heard. If you permit your kids to spend all their time filling up on okay things, then they won't have time for the great things. For more resources on living books, try www.classicalreader.com or readaloudrevival.com, all book lists. Education is the science of relations. Charlotte Mason's 12th principle. At some point in the child's education, he begins to make connections for himself between different things. I once heard a story about a girl, perhaps 6 years old, who connected the behavior of the fire ants in her yard to a story she had learned in history. No one could predict or anticipate that kind of relationship or make it the goal of a lesson plan. It was her own observation, her own insight, that saw the relationship between the ants and the history. Education is the science of relations, the relations we form and the relations we see. The principle, education is the science of relations, is not one dimensional, but broad and vital. Laying an educational feast. Picture a banquet, a feast, lavishly spread on a long table. Now keep that picture in your mind, for that is how Charlotte Mason described the abundance of ideas that we should make available to our children in their schoolwork. How does this idea of laying an educational feast fit in with multum non multas and the other ideas we discussed? Well, if education is the science of relations, then let us lay an educational feast using living books and living ideas, providing emphasis on quality of abstract things such as wisdom, virtue, and knowledge, diving deeply into few subjects over quantity of material things or an overabundance of subjects, in hopes that our children will make those educational connections and grow to have a love of education that fits in with their ordo amoris, along with a love of God and serving others. Okay, so at this point in the video, you guys probably know where this is going. I've been talking about Charlotte Mason the last couple months and how Charlotte Mason said that education is an atmosphere, a discipline, and a life. We've talked about education as an atmosphere and a discipline. So let's tie in now to how education is a life and what she meant by that. Education is a life. For the mind is capable of dealing with only one kind of food. It lives, grows, and is nourished upon ideas only. Mere information is to it as a meal of sawdust is to the body. There are no organs for the assimilation of the one more than of the other. Our minds need ideas like our bodies need food, and therefore, education is a life on its own as our minds need to be fed and nourished with a feast of ideas. I hope that we've all been able to feed our own educational lives with a little bit of information from our classical education overview video here. And I'm going to go ahead and share here some quotes from some wonderful moms from our Armor Bears groups and a book list if you are in a fall mood and ready to snuggle up with a book and some coffee and a blanket. You can read on educational philosophy. What is your favorite thing about classical education for your kids so far? That it creates a wonder in learning. It has taught my children to think critically and evaluate information through a biblical lens. The combination of rich literature and history that makes learning so dynamic and engaging, all while pointing to God and His eternal truths. Book list in no particular order. The Lost Tools of Learning by Dorothy Sayers. Consider This, Charlotte Mason and the Classical Tradition by Karen Glass. The Liberal Arts Tradition, A Philosophy of Christian Classical Education by Ravi Jain and Kevin Clark. The Well-Trained Mind, A Guide to Classical Education at Home by Susan Wise Bauer. Teaching from Rest, A Homeschooler's Guide to Unshakable Peace by Sarah McKenzie. Better Together, Strengthen Your Family, Simplify Your Homeschool, and Savor the Subjects That Matter Most by Pam Barnhill. The Read Aloud Family, Making Meaningful and Lasting Connections with Your Kids by Sarah McKenzie. Mere Motherhood, Morning Times, Nursery Rhymes, and My Journey Towards Sanctification by Cindy Rollins. Other resources. If there's not a lot of time or opportunity in your life to sit and read books, there are other ways to still feed their educational mind. Some of that is with podcasts. Two options are Basecamp Live podcast with host Davies Owens and the Scholay Sisters podcast with host Brandy Vinsel. In the comments section below the video, please share. What are you looking forward to most in terms of educating your kids via a classical education? Or what has been your favorite thing so far about raising your kids with a classical education? Thanks so much for watching. Hope everyone has a wonderful week. This video was made with contributions from our GDA Armor Bearers. At GDA, Armor Bearers is a group of moms who are committed to supporting and encouraging our GDA family. They are here to connect and help one-on-one and would love to connect with you at one of their Armor Bearer events, so be sure to keep a lookout for those.